What's up guys, it's Cacti Man here with the late night video. On today's video I wanted to commemorate this little special flower that I have blooming here, and I wanted to take this opportunity to show you guys how to pollinate a dragon fruit flower so that hopefully you guys can get fruits like this and like these, you know, if it successfully takes. Alright, so first things first is understanding the parts of the actual flower itself. Let me activate these lights right here. There we go. So here you have the flower, of course. So this is the flower, the whole thing, and this little piece right here is what is actually the fruit. This is where the ovary of the flower is, and this is the part that swells up and becomes the fruit. So here you have the flowers, you know, then you have the petals, obviously, very nice petals. Sorry, I'm trying to get this light activated. Oh well. And then you have this. I believe they're called the sepals, but they're not important to the flower. The important part of the flower. Okay, so the part important for us to understand are these little things right here and this green thing right here, right? So these little things are the anthers, and they carry the sperm of the plant. This is the male part of the plant. Well, this little thing right here receives the pollen and is known as the stigma, this little green part right here. The whole thing, the stigma and the tube, is known as the pistil, but that's not really important. So what you guys are going to do if you have a self-pollinating plant, which most of you probably do, is you're going to take something like a brush, preferably not a toothbrush, preferably not a toothbrush, maybe something like a paintbrush, something more sanitary, and you're going to take, you know, the pollen from the anthers until this thing is coated yellow, and then you're going to place it on the stigma. So the stigma, it looks like it has a little hole in the middle, and I guess it does, but that hole is not necessary. What actually you need to pollinate are these little tiny fingers that you see here. They're kind of sticky, and they cling to the pollen really nicely. And there's a misconception that you need to get pollen down the tube, but no, you don't. You don't need to get pollen inside the hole, and you don't need to get it down the tube. Just on the little fingers is fine, because what happens is that once they get on the fingers, the plant recognizes the sperm from the pollen, and it'll send up microtubes up of this big tube that connects to each pollen. So you'll have thousands of little tubes that'll connect to each thousands of little pollens, and they'll all connect themselves to one of the eggs in the ovary, and then they'll form a seed. And then if they successfully pollinate enough eggs and create enough seeds, then the flower takes and you start forming fruit. So the important thing to note is that you need to put pollen on here, on the little fingers, and not inside the tube. So don't worry. Some of you guys may have flowers that point downwards, sideways, whatever. They don't need to stick straight up, because like I said, they just stick to this, and it can be upside down. It doesn't matter. It'll still pollinate if it's self-fertile. So here's a more complicated part that the average dragon fruit plant grower doesn't know. You know, I always see a lot of questions, especially I had a neighbor actually come up to me and they asked, you know, I get flowers all the time, but I never see any fruit. I pollinate it and everything, but I don't see fruit. And unfortunately, that's because there are self-sterile flowers, which means there are dragon fruit plants where the pollen is not able to pollinate the stigma from the same flower, right? So a flower is not able to pollinate itself, and that's unfortunate, but it does happen. Most white dragon fruit is self-fertile, so you don't have to really worry about it if you have white dragon fruit, especially from chain stores. But in some rare unfortunate cases like mine, where I got this plant from a friend, this white dragon fruit is unfortunately self-sterile, which is one of the rare cases, but it does happen, and I found out the hard way last year. So now I know better, and now because of that, I brought myself this pollen right here. Right, this pollen is from a red dragon fruit plant, and it's actually from that Cosmic Charlie right there. Right, so I saved this pollen, and I'll make a video about how to save pollen later. But yeah, this is red dragon fruit pollen, and I'm using it to pollinate this white dragon fruit. right? And the surefire way to pollinate self-sterile plants is to make sure you get a plant from a different species. So this white dragon fruit is self-sterile, so it probably isn't a good idea to get pollen from a whole different plant if the plant is also white, because the genetics are too closely related and it most likely won't recognize the pollen as viable. So to do that, you want as genetically different as possible. So I have this red flesh dragon fruit, which is actually a whole different species of dragon fruit. So this is actually something like guatemalensis, while this is undatus, or white dragon fruit. And then guatemalensis, red dragon fruit. You know, that's more advanced, but that's basically the gist of it. Different species will successfully pollinate each other. So I'll get my red pollen, right? This red pollen, and get it on my brush, just like that. There, you can see there on the tip, yellow. Let me get some light so I can properly show you guys. There we go. And then I'll take this and then I'll just dab it on little fingers. This toothbrush is not the best at clinging to the pollen, so you might want to get something better, like a fine paintbrush or something. Maybe even your finger will work better than this toothbrush. But as you can see, the pollen is gone, which means it's now on the stigma. And if I can get some light, maybe you can see close enough that there's little dust glitters on the little fingers, which is the pollen. So you do that enough time and enough seeds will get pollinated and you'll get a fruit. So if you guys are having questions about why you're not getting fruit from your dragon fruit, it's probably self-sterile. So you might want to get pollen from a different source, maybe a friend or on OfferUp or in the dragon fruit group or something, you know, and then hopefully that'll work and you can get fruit. But yeah, guys, that's been how to pollinate dragon fruit. Hopefully these tips worked and you can get a fruit. Here's another flower and you can get fruit. You know that you're gonna get fruit if a few weeks later, as in my case, it's been 3 weeks and this dragon fruit is still pretty green, pretty holding on there. So that's a pretty good sign. I think about 2 more weeks and it should be done. Here's a little tiny one. So one interesting to note actually is that this one, so this is Cosmic Charlie. It's a hybrid of guatemalensis and some other varieties. And this plant right here was pollinated by a white dragon fruit, which is a whole different species. But this one was pollinated by a hybrid that also contained guatemalensis, the same variety as Cosmic Charlie. So as you can see, it's a really small fruit, while this one's a big fruit. So this was cross-pollinated, and this was pretty much self-pollinated, even though this plant is self-sterile, right? Some little seeds were able to be pollinated somehow, even though the genetics are really close. And as you can see, when you have something pollinated by itself, the fruits tend to be smaller versus cross-pollination, where the fruits tend to be larger, which is just an interesting thing to note. If fruit is what you're after, you might always want to go the cross-pollination route. Now, I don't know why the fruit is smaller, but it is a common observed phenomena that I've seen around and I've seen many people talk about. And my hypothesis is that because the genetics are so similar, the seeds, a much smaller number of eggs inside the fruit actually get pollinated versus this one, because, you know, like I said, the eggs tend to reject similarly genetic material. So how do you say, so less eggs actually get fertilized and less seeds develop, and because there are less seeds developed, there is less, there's less actual fruit around the seeds that are used to protect it and to attract animals, because there's less seeds. So there's more seeds in this one and therefore more fruit surrounding the seeds than this one. This has less seeds and less fruit surrounding it. So I think that's my hypothesis on why the fruits are actually smaller. But you know, I don't I'm not a dragon fruit PhD holder, so it's just a hypothesis from what I can gather. So I don't know, but that's just a little bit of nerding out knowledge, not really too important. But yeah, guys, I hope this video was informational and hopefully entertaining also, and I hope you guys good luck in your dragon fruit journey. You guys are getting closer and closer every day to getting your first fruit. for those of you who haven't. And for those of you that are better in dragon fruit, you know, tell me what I got wrong. Give me some tips. I'm always open. We're always learning. Even the most veteran of us are learning. All right, guys. Hope I helped you out. And have a good one. Bye.